Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Facts channel. I'm so glad you found your way here. Maybe you had a long day, or maybe you're the kind of person who likes falling asleep to mysteries of bioluminescent creatures rather than counting sheep. Either way, tonight's journey is for you. Let your mind relax, your breathing slow, and your body grow light as if floating in dark waters lit only by living stars. Because tonight, we're exploring glowing ocean life, creatures that make their own light in the depths where sunlight never reaches. We'll drift from shimmering jellyfish to deep-sea anglerfish, discovering how and why these animals create their own constellations beneath the waves. Some of what you hear tonight may surprise you, or at least spark curiosity as you drift off. Before we begin, if this helps you unwind, consider liking and subscribing, one sleepy soul at a time. Now, let's begin. Bioluminescence is the ability of living creatures to produce their own light through chemical reactions within their bodies. This glow comes from a molecule called luciferin, which reacts with oxygen in the presence of an enzyme called luciferase, creating light without heat. It is one of the most efficient forms of light production in nature, converting nearly all the energy into illumination rather than wasting it as warmth. The creatures who possess this gift shine like cool blue stars in the darkness, their bodies carrying their own private lanterns through waters where no other light can reach. Around 90% of creatures living in the deep ocean possess the ability to create light. In the twilight zone of the sea, where sunlight fades to almost nothing between 200 and 1,000 meters down, bioluminescence becomes more common than darkness itself. This means that in the vast majority of ocean space, which exists in perpetual night, life glows. The deep sea is not the black void we once imagined, but rather a realm of living constellations, where every creature seems to carry a piece of starlight within its body, transforming the abyss into a galaxy beneath the waves. The firefly squid gathers in enormous numbers in Toyama Bay, Japan, each spring to spawn. These small creatures, no longer than 3 inches, possess light-producing organs called photophores, scattered across their bodies, with 3 special larger organs beneath their eyes. When millions arrive together in the shallow waters near shore, they create a phenomenon so luminous that the sea itself appears to glow electric blue, visible from beaches and boats above. Fishermen have known this spectacle for generations, timing their catches to these gatherings, while the squid themselves drift through the lit waters like tiny UFOs, their bodies pulsing with coordinated light that ripples through the schools in waves of communication we are only beginning to understand. Dinoflagellates are microscopic organisms that create the phenomenon known as bioluminescent bays or glowing waves. These single-celled creatures float by the billions in certain tropical waters, and when disturbed by movement, whether from a swimming hand, a breaking wave, or the passage of a dolphin, they emit flashes of blue-green light. The effect creates trails of liquid starlight through the water, turning every splash and ripple into a cascade of sparkles. In places like Mosquito Bay in Puerto Rico or the Maldives, the concentration of dinoflagellates grows so dense that simply walking through shallow water at night leaves glowing footprints behind, as if the ocean itself is responding to touch with bursts of cold fire. The crystal jelly, also known as Icoria victoria, drifts through the waters of the Pacific Northwest with a translucent bell that can reach up to 10 inches across. Along the outer rim of its umbrella, more than 100 tiny organs produce green bioluminescent light when the jellyfish is disturbed. But this creature's contribution to science extends far beyond its own glow. In the 1960s, researchers discovered that the crystal jelly produces a protein called green fluorescent protein, or GFP, which absorbs blue light and re-emits it as green. This discovery revolutionized biological research, allowing scientists to track genes and proteins in living cells by making them glow, and the researchers who isolated GFP eventually received the Nobel Prize for their work, all thanks to this drifting, glowing jellyfish that had been producing its light in silence for millions of years. The anglerfish that lives in the deepest parts of the ocean carries a fishing rod growing from its head, tipped with a glowing lure. This appendage, called an esker, dangles in front of the fish's enormous mouth, lit by bioluminescent bacteria that live in a symbiotic relationship within the lure's tissue. The bacteria receive shelter and nutrients, while the anglerfish receives a hunting lamp that attracts curious prey in the absolute darkness of the deep sea, sometimes 2,000 meters below the surface, where no hint of sunlight penetrates. The anglerfish hangs motionless in the current, patient as stone, its lure glowing softly like a tiny lantern swaying in an endless night, waiting for something to drift close enough to investigate the only light for miles around. The cookie-cutter shark, despite its small size of only about 20 inches long, possesses a remarkable pattern of bioluminescence along its underside. The shark's belly glows with a soft green light that matches the faint sunlight filtering down from above, a camouflage technique called counter-illumination that makes the shark invisible when viewed from below. However, the cookie cutter leaves one small area of its throat dark, creating a shadow that resembles a small fish. Larger predators, seeing what appears to be an easy meal swimming above them, rise to investigate and find themselves face to face with the cookie cutter's specialized round mouth full of sharp triangular teeth. The shark then attaches like a suction cup and spins its body, carving out a perfect circular plug of flesh before swimming away, leaving its much larger victim with a distinctive wound, a testament to how cleverly light and shadow can be weaponized in the ocean's depths. Vampire squid drift through the oxygen minimum zones of the deep ocean, regions where oxygen levels drop so low that few other creatures can survive. Despite their ominous name, these animals do not hunt living prey but instead feed on marine snow, the gentle rain of dead plankton, and organic particles that drifts down from the surface waters above. The vampire squid's body, only about 6 inches long, contains the largest eyes relative to body size of any animal on Earth, and it is covered in light-producing organs that can create displays of glowing clouds and flashing patterns. When threatened, the squid does not flee, but instead turns itself inside out, wrapping its webbed arms over its body, while the tips of those arms flash with brilliant bioluminescent displays, creating a confusing light show that startles predators long enough for the vampire squid to drift away into darkness, leaving only confusion and fading sparkles behind. The bobtail squid, a small creature no bigger than a human thumb, forms one of the most studied partnerships between an animal and bioluminescent bacteria. Each newborn squid must acquire glowing bacteria from the surrounding seawater, specifically the species Vibrio fishery, which colonize a special light organ in the squid's mantle. The squid provides the bacteria with nutrients and a perfect environment, while the bacteria produce light that the squid projects downward, matching the moonlight or starlight filtering through the water above. This counter-illumination erases the squid's shadow, making it invisible to predators hunting from below. Every morning, the squid expels most of the bacterial population, keeping only a small seed culture. And throughout the day, the bacteria multiply again, ready to provide light when darkness returns and the squid emerges to hunt, a daily rhythm of partnership that has evolved over millions of years. Certain species of jellyfish create bioluminescent displays so elaborate they appear to pulse in coordinated patterns, though each jellyfish has no central brain to control such timing. The comb jelly, though not a true jellyfish, moves through the water by beating rows of hair-like cilia arranged in 8 lines along its body. These cilia refract light, creating rainbow effects that ripple along the creature's body even in sunlight. But many comb jellies also produce true bioluminescence when disturbed, flashing with blue or green light that travels in waves along their combs. The effect resembles a living lava lamp or a spaceship from a dream, something too perfectly geometric and rhythmic to seem entirely real. Yet there it drifts in the midnight waters, powered by nothing but cellular machinery refined across hundreds of millions of years. The sea firefly, a type of ostracod crustacean found in the waters around Japan, creates one of the most spectacular light displays in the shallow ocean. These creatures, only about 3 millimeters long, look like tiny swimming beans with segmented bodies hidden inside a translucent shell. When disturbed, Sea fireflies release clouds of glowing chemicals into the water, creating blue luminescent plumes that spread and swirl with the currents. In certain bays, when thousands of sea fireflies are disturbed simultaneously, perhaps by the wake of a boat or the churning of a storm, the water fills with so much glowing blue mist that the ocean appears to contain trapped lightning, frozen in slow motion, drifting and dispersing like smoke made of starlight. Lanternfish make up an estimated 65% of all deep-sea fish biomass, making them possibly the most abundant vertebrates on Earth. These small fish, rarely longer than 6 inches, possess rows of light-producing organs along their sides and bellies in patterns unique to each species, like living identification badges. Each night, lanternfish participate in the largest migration of biomass on the planet, rising from depths of several hundred meters to feed in the richer surface waters under cover of darkness, then descending again before sunrise. As they travel, their bellies glow, eliminating their silhouettes through counter-illumination, and they move in such vast numbers that naval sonar systems once mistook the dense layers of lanternfish for the ocean floor itself, a false bottom made entirely of living, glowing creatures. The hatchetfish has a body so thin it appears two-dimensional when viewed from the front, resembling a silver hatchet blade standing upright in the water. Along its belly, a series of light organs point downward, and the fish can adjust the intensity of this glow to precisely match the faint light filtering down from hundreds of meters above. This ability requires constant calibration, as the fish slowly rises and falls with its prey throughout the day, always maintaining the perfect amount of light to remain invisible. Special silver scales on its sides reflect light in ways that break up its outline, and its upward-pointing eyes scan for the silhouettes of prey above, while the hatchetfish itself creates no silhouette, existing as a kind of living ghost in the twilight zone, where most hunting occurs by shadow and suggestion rather than sight. Certain species of octopus possess not only the famous ability to change color and texture, but also the capacity to create bioluminescent displays. The deep-sea octopus, discovered in recent years in the waters near hydrothermal vents, shows patterns of light along its skin that pulse and travel in waves, though researchers are still studying whether these patterns serve communication, camouflage, or some other purpose entirely. The octopus, being highly intelligent with a nervous system distributed throughout its 8 arms, might use these lights as a form of body language more sophisticated than we yet understand. Each arm contains as many neurons as the central brain, meaning the octopus thinks with its entire body. And if that body can glow, then perhaps its thoughts can be read in patterns of light, rippling across its skin like words written in a language older than words. The midshipman fish earns its name from the rows of light organs along its sides, which resemble the brass buttons on a naval officer's uniform. These fish, which can grow to about 15 inches long, live along the Pacific coast and possess both bioluminescent abilities and the capacity to produce loud humming sounds during mating season. The males create nests under rocks in shallow water and hum for hours, sometimes so loudly that people living on houseboats complain of the vibrations keeping them awake. The bioluminescent organs, however, shine brightest in deeper waters, where the fish spend most of their lives, their button-like lights creating the appearance of decorated uniforms in the darkness, perhaps serving to help midshipman fish recognize their own species among the countless other glowing creatures drifting through the same waters. The dragonfish hunts in complete darkness, with a body perfectly adapted to the deep-sea environment. Its teeth protrude even when its mouth is closed, giving it a fierce appearance. But more remarkably, it possesses a special light organ beneath each eye that can produce red bioluminescence. Most deep-sea creatures can only see blue and green wavelengths, as red light is absorbed quickly by seawater and therefore does not exist in the depths. The dragonfish, however, has evolved to both produce and see red light, giving it a private flashlight invisible to its prey. It can illuminate other creatures with its red beam, seeing them clearly while they remain completely unaware they are being watched, like a predator with infrared goggles hunting in what appears to other creatures as total darkness. holding an advantage so significant that it seems almost unfair. Yet this is simply one more example of evolution's endless creativity in the eternal darkness below. The glass squid drifts through mid-water depths with a body so transparent that you can see its internal organs suspended in the clear jelly of its flesh. Many of its organs are coated in reflective tissue or arranged to minimize their visibility. But the most remarkable feature is the light organs positioned near the squid's eyes. These photophores produce light that the squid can direct and modulate, creating flashes or steady glows depending on the situation. Some species of glass squid also have light organs on their tentacles, and in the darkness of the deep sea, these glowing appendages can be extended far from the body, creating points of light that might attract curious prey while keeping the squid's vulnerable body safely distant. The overall effect is of a creature trying its best to disappear entirely, succeeding except for a few necessary betrayals: the eyes that must gather light to see, the organs that must function to live, and the strategic lights it chooses to show. Small signals in an enormous dark space. The siphonophore belongs to the same group of animals as jellyfish, but exists as a colony rather than a single organism. Some siphonophores create chains of specialized polyps that can stretch to incredible lengths, with the longest recorded individual reaching over 150 feet, making it potentially the longest animal on Earth. Each polyp in the colony has a specific job. Some catch food, some digest it, some propel the whole chain through the water, and many produce bioluminescent light. When disturbed, the entire length of the siphonophore can flash with waves of blue light that travel along its body like a train of lights passing in the night. These creatures drift through the deep ocean in loose spirals and loops, their length undulating with the current, sometimes coiling into massive formations that resemble undersea galaxies, all created by what is technically not one animal but thousands working together so seamlessly they might as well be one. Brittle stars, relatives of starfish, scuttle across the ocean floor on 5 long, thin arms that can regenerate if lost. While not all species are bioluminescent, those that live in the deep sea often possess the ability to produce green or blue light along their arms. When a predator attacks, a brittle star can deliberately break off one of its arms, which continues to writhe and flash with light while the main body escapes into a crevice in the rocks. The sacrificed arm serves as both distraction and decoy, its bioluminescent display holding the predator's attention, while the brittle star, now safe, begins the slow process of growing a replacement. This defense mechanism is so effective that some brittle stars seem to shed arms almost casually, gambling that the cost of regeneration is worth the certainty of survival, each detached arm flashing its last lights in service of the whole. The Atolla jellyfish, also known as the alarm jellyfish, creates one of the most sophisticated defensive light displays in the ocean. When attacked, usually by a predator large enough to bite through its gelatinous bell, the Atolla jellyfish begins to pulse with waves of blue bioluminescence that circle around its bell, like an alarm light spinning atop an emergency vehicle. This burglar alarm display is thought to attract even larger predators to the scene, predators that might eat the creature currently attacking the jellyfish. The Atolla essentially calls for help by creating a light show so noticeable in the darkness that it brings attention to the entire interaction, hoping that the new arrival will prefer eating the first predator instead. The jellyfish drifts away while this confusion unfolds, its alarm still flashing, a distress signal that weaponizes the food chain itself, turning the presence of enemies into an opportunity rather than a certainty of death. The headlight fish carries permanently glowing organs beneath each eye, which contain bioluminescent bacteria that produce steady light. Rather than controlling the light by changing its intensity, which would require complex physiological adjustments, the headlight fish has evolved a simpler solution, a dark lid that can slide over the light organ, like closing curtains. The fish can communicate, hunt, and hide by simply opening and closing these lids in various patterns, creating a form of Morse code with its built-in headlamps. Schools of headlight fish create complex displays as dozens of lights blink on and off in the darkness, though what messages they convey remains largely mysterious. We can observe the patterns, count the rhythms, and note which displays correlate with which behaviors, but the actual content of their communication, if communication it is, remains unreadable, like watching a distant city at night and seeing windows light up in sequence, without knowing why those particular lights in that particular order, at that particular time. The sea pen looks more like a plant than an animal, standing upright on the ocean floor with a central stalk, and many polyps branching off it like the veins of a feather. Despite their appearance, sea pens are colonies of animals related to corals and jellyfish, and many species produce bioluminescent light when touched. If a diver runs a hand along a sea pen, or if a fish brushes against it while swimming past, waves of green or blue light pulse up the stalk and along the branches, creating a display that looks like a living Christmas tree lighting up in sequence. The light might startle the creature that touched it, or it might serve the same burglar alarm function as the Atolla jellyfish, attracting predators to investigate the disturbance. Either way, the sea pen returns to darkness after the light show fades, rooted in the sediment, waiting patiently for the next touch, the next opportunity to transform contact into luminescence. Some species of marine worms produce bioluminescence so bright they are sometimes called fireworms. The Bermuda fireworm performs one of the most precisely timed bioluminescent rituals in nature, spawning in the waters above coral reefs at very specific times, usually 55 minutes after sunset. On nights shortly after the full moon, the females rise from the reef first, swimming in circles while releasing glowing mucus that creates spirals of green light in the water. Males, seeing these signals, rush upward from the reef while also releasing glowing material, and within moments the water fills with spiraling galaxies of light as hundreds of worms spawn simultaneously. The timing must be exact because the sperm and eggs only remain viable for a short time, and the light shows ensure that males and females find each other in the vast darkness. After just a few minutes, the light fades, the worms return to the reef, and the water returns to darkness. The entire spectacle, as brief as it is brilliant, like fireworks that know their own schedule. The flashlight fish possesses such bright, bioluminescent organs that it can be seen from dozens of feet away in dark water. These organs, located beneath the eyes and filled with luminous bacteria, shine continuously. And like the headlight fish, the flashlight fish controls their visibility with a dark membrane that rotates up to cover the light. Schools of flashlight fish use these lights to coordinate movement in the darkness. And some researchers believe the patterns of blinking communicate information about food sources or threats. During the day, flashlight fish hide in caves and crevices in the reef, but at night they emerge to hunt small crustaceans, using their lights both to see and to confuse prey. Some prey animals, dazzled by the sudden brightness, freeze or move toward the light instead of fleeing, making themselves easier to catch. The fish themselves seem to play with their lights, flashing in patterns that suggest enjoyment rather than pure function, though perhaps the boundary between the two is less clear than we assume, and what serves survival can also bring something like joy. The deep-sea jellyfish Atolla wivili possesses a crown of long tentacles that trail behind its bell as it drifts through the water, each tentacle potentially extending many times the length of the body itself. One tentacle, however, grows much longer than the others, sometimes reaching 30 times the body length, stretching away into the darkness like a fishing line. This elongated tentacle is covered in stinging cells and might encounter prey far from the jellyfish's body, expanding the creature's hunting range to an enormous sphere of influence. When the jellyfish's alarm system activates, not only does the bell flash with spinning lights, but all the tentacles pulse with bioluminescence, creating a complex three-dimensional display that fills a much larger volume of water with light than the small body would suggest possible. The effect transforms a jellyfish no bigger than an orange into a presence that commands yards of ocean space, asserting existence through light, in a place where existence otherwise means nothing more than a slight difference in pressure and temperature, invisible and alone. Certain species of brittle star can actually detect light with their entire body, despite having no eyes. Their skeletons contain microscopic structures that function like thousands of tiny lenses, allowing the creature to sense the direction and intensity of light across its entire surface. This ability helps the brittle star navigate between sheltered and exposed areas on the reef, but it also raises interesting questions about these creatures' bioluminescence. If a brittle star can sense light with its whole body, then when it produces its own bioluminescent display, it experiences that light not just as something it creates, but as something it simultaneously perceives. The brittle star becomes both light source and light detector, both broadcaster and receiver, experiencing its own glow as it flashes through the water, creating a feedback loop of luminescence and sensation that might be as close as we can imagine to what it feels like to be your own star. The parchment tube worm lives inside a U-shaped tube it builds from mucus and sediment on the ocean floor, with both ends of the tube opening to the water above. The worm itself, which can grow to several inches long, possesses a segmented body covered in bristles that help it move back and forth inside its tube. When disturbed, some species of parchment worms produce clouds of bioluminescent mucus that they eject from their tubes, creating blue-green smoke signals in the water that might startle predators or serve as decoys. The worm remains safe inside its tube while the glowing cloud drifts away, and the light can persist for several minutes before fading. This technique represents a different approach to bioluminescence, not light produced by the animal's body directly, but light created in a substance the animal manufactures and then releases, a kind of living smoke bomb that buys time and space in the crucial moments after a threat appears. The strawberry squid lives in the deep mesopelagic zone and has evolved one of the most unusual solutions to the challenge of hunting in low light. Its left eye is much larger than its right eye, sometimes twice the size, creating a distinctly lopsided appearance. The large eye looks upward, scanning for silhouettes of prey against the faint light from above, while the smaller eye looks downward into the deeper darkness, watching for bioluminescent flashes that might indicate prey or predators below. This asymmetry allows the squid to monitor two different visual environments simultaneously, processing different kinds of information with each eye. The squid's body also contains light organs that glow yellow-green, unusual colors for deep-sea bioluminescence, and the animal can adjust its light output to match the ambient conditions. Drifting through the twilight zone with its mismatched eyes and glowing body, the strawberry squid represents yet another solution to the problems of living, where light becomes scarce but does not entirely disappear. The Tomopteris worm, also called the gossamer worm, swims freely in the open ocean, with a transparent body that renders it nearly invisible. This segmented worm uses paddle-like appendages to propel itself through the water with undulating motions, and at the tips of these appendages, it possesses the unique ability to produce yellow bioluminescence, one of the few instances of yellow bioluminescence in the ocean. When threatened, the worm can release its glowing appendages, which break off and float away while continuing to shine, serving as decoys, similar to the brittle star's sacrificed arms. The yellow light is particularly unusual because most deep-sea creatures cannot see longer wavelengths like yellow or red, meaning this light might primarily serve to startle creatures that hunt in the upper mesopelagic zone, where some surface light still penetrates. The gossamer worm drifts like living tissue paper through the water columns, visible only when it chooses to glow, transparent and present, and watching with whatever senses guide it through liquid space. The scale worm, a family of marine worms that includes many species, possesses overlapping scales along its back that can flash with bioluminescent light when the worm is disturbed. These scales can actually detach from the worm's body, and when they do, they continue to glow, creating multiple points of light that drift away in different directions, while the worm itself escapes. Some scale worms live in symbiotic relationships with other animals, making their homes in the tubes of other worms or among the arms of sea stars. And when their host is threatened, the scale worm's bioluminescence might serve to protect both residents of the partnership. The scales themselves contain the light-producing chemistry, which means each scale is a self-contained light source, and a single worm might release dozens of these living lanterns when sufficiently alarmed, filling the surrounding water with so many glowing points that any predator faces a confusing decision about which light to follow, usually choosing wrong. The giant squid, though not primarily thought of as a bioluminescent creature, possesses light organs on its body, despite living in depths where it might seem to have evolved beyond the need for light. These organs, called photophores, appear on the underside of the squid and might serve for counter-illumination camouflage, though the giant squid's enormous size, potentially reaching lengths of 40 feet or more, makes such camouflage seem almost pointless. Researchers have also suggested that the light organs might help giant squid identify each other in the darkness, or possibly coordinate during the mating process, which has never been observed. Nearly everything about giant squid behavior remains speculation, as these animals live in depths rarely visited by humans and seem to die quickly when brought to the surface. They exist primarily as mysteries occasionally washed onto beaches, their bodies massive and ruined. But sometimes, with bioluminescent organs still intact, small lights in the tissue of a creature we know mostly through legend and glimpses. The piglet squid drifts through deep waters with a body so round and stubby that it resembles its namesake, complete with a tuft of tentacles positioned above its eyes that look remarkably like hair, and a siphon below that suggests a smiling snout. This small squid, rarely more than 4 inches long, fills its body with ammonia-rich fluid that provides buoyancy, allowing it to hang motionless in the water column without expending energy. Along its body, patterns of photophores create light displays that serve both camouflage and communication, and the squid can control these lights independently, creating traveling waves of bioluminescence that move across its round form. Despite its comical appearance, the piglet squid is precisely adapted to its environment, using its light organs to become invisible from below, while its upward-gazing eyes search for prey silhouetted against the dim light filtering from far above. A patient hunter that looks like a cartoon, but thinks like a predator, refined by millions of years in the dark. The chain cat shark lays eggs in long spiral cases that attach to coral or rocks on the seafloor. And while the adults show minimal bioluminescence, recent research suggests that the embryos developing inside their egg cases might produce light. This would serve a protective function, as the egg cases are translucent enough that the developing shark inside could be visible to predators, but bioluminescence matching the ambient light conditions would camouflage the embryo through counter-illumination even before birth. The idea that an animal not yet hatched already uses the same survival strategies it will employ as an adult suggests how deeply these adaptations run in species that have lived in the deep sea for countless generations, each individual beginning its relationship with light and darkness while still curled inside an egg case. Anchored to stone, already glowing, already invisible, already practicing the art of not being seen, the umbrella jellyfish possesses a thick bell that can reach 2 feet across, making it one of the larger jellyfish species in the deep sea. Its bioluminescent organs line the edge of the bell and can create flashing patterns when the jellyfish is disturbed. But the umbrella jellyfish also hosts a remarkable relationship with small fish that shelter beneath its bell. These juvenile fish use the jellyfish as protection from larger predators, swimming in the space between the trailing tentacles, where the jellyfish's sting presumably keeps larger threats at bay. When the jellyfish produces its light displays, the fish beneath it are illuminated as well, yet they remain with their host, suggesting the protection is worth the increased visibility. The jellyfish drifts on, seemingly indifferent to its passengers, its bell pulsing slowly, its tentacles trailing like roots in the current, and beneath it all, the small fish holding station in the shadows of something ancient and patient that existed long before fish evolved and will likely persist long after. Certain species of octocorals, relatives of sea fans and soft corals, produce bioluminescent waves of light that travel along their colonies when touched. These colonial animals consist of many small polyps connected by living tissue, and when one polyp is stimulated, the signal propagates to neighboring polyps, creating a chain reaction of light that moves across the entire colony in visible waves. This coordinated response might serve to startle predators or, as with many bioluminescent displays, attract larger predators to the scene of the disturbance. The octocoral itself remains anchored to the substrate, unable to flee. So its defense consists entirely of communication, chemical deterrence, and light displays that call for help from creatures that might not even know they are being summoned. The wave of light travels across the colony's surface like wind moving through wheat, except the wheat is alive and glowing and calling out into a darkness that might contain salvation or might contain nothing at all. The gulper eel possesses a mouth so large it can expand to swallow prey larger than itself, and its long whip-like tail ends in a complex light organ that produces pink bioluminescence. The eel can wave this lighted lure through the water, potentially attracting prey toward its head. Though some researchers believe the light organ might also serve to attract mates, as gulper eels are rarely encountered and their reproductive behavior remains largely unknown. The eel's body, which can reach lengths of 6 feet though most of that is tail, appears to be mostly mouth and stomach, optimized for swallowing whatever food it encounters in the nutrient-poor environment of the deep sea. The pink light at its tail end stands out among the more common blue and green bioluminescence of the deep ocean, creating a beacon that marks this creature as different, specialized, living in depths where specialization often means the difference between eating and starving, between finding a mate and dying alone. The sea cucumber, despite its plant-like name and appearance, is an animal related to sea stars and sea urchins, and some species possess bioluminescent capabilities. When threatened, certain sea cucumbers can expel sticky, glowing threads from their bodies that entangle predators, while the sea cucumber itself crawls slowly away. These threads, called Cuvierian tubules, are part of the sea cucumber's respiratory system, meaning the animal is essentially weaponizing its own lungs, sacrificing breathing capacity for defense. The bioluminescent glow makes the sticky threads more visible in the darkness, potentially causing the predator to waste time trying to remove the glowing strands while the sea cucumber escapes at its characteristic glacial pace. The threads can be regenerated over time, so the defense costs the sea cucumber only temporary breathing efficiency. And in an environment where threats arrive slowly and food is scarce, slow regeneration of body parts becomes just another operational cost of survival, no stranger than shedding skin or growing new cells. The stoplight loosejaw fish has a lower jaw that disconnects from the skull, allowing its mouth to open at extraordinary angles to engulf prey nearly as large as itself. This fish also possesses the ability to produce red bioluminescence from light organs beneath its eyes, similar to the dragonfish, giving it a private flashlight invisible to most other deep-sea creatures. The loosejaw's eyes contain special pigments that allow it to see red light, meaning it can illuminate potential prey without alerting them to its presence. The fish drifts through absolute darkness, using a hunting strategy based on asymmetric information, seeing what cannot see back, approaching what has no warning of approach. The jaw, when it finally springs open, moves faster than most prey can react, and the stoplight loosejaw swallows its meal, while its light organs continue to glow red in the darkness, marking a predator so perfectly adapted to its environment that it seems to have evolved beyond the basic rules of predation into something more like omniscience within its small hunting range in the infinite dark. The pelagic octopus Japetella heathi lives in the open ocean rather than on the sea floor, and possesses the remarkable ability to change from transparent to opaque, depending on the light conditions around it. In the upper mesopelagic zone, where faint sunlight still penetrates, the octopus makes its body transparent to avoid being seen. But when it descends into deeper waters, where bioluminescence becomes the primary light source, it switches to a reddish-brown, opaque coloration that absorbs most wavelengths of bioluminescent light, again making itself difficult to see. This transformation takes only minutes, making the octopus one of the few animals that can switch between fundamentally different camouflage strategies based on its depth. The octopus drifts between these zones, hunting and hiding, transparent, becoming opaque, becoming transparent, again as it rises and falls through the water column, existing as proof that invisibility takes many forms, and the best disguise depends entirely on context, on what light exists to reveal you, and which predators have eyes refined enough to notice your presence against the background noise of the living sea. The helmet jellyfish, Periphylla, glows with deep red bioluminescence, unusual in a world where most ocean light runs blue or green. This jellyfish's bell resembles a Roman helmet, hence its name, and can grow to about 6 inches tall. The red bioluminescence might serve to startle predators, or could be less visible to most deep-sea creatures, many of which cannot detect longer wavelengths. The helmet jellyfish population has exploded in some areas in recent decades, possibly due to overfishing of their predators and competitors, and in certain Norwegian fjords, they now appear in such numbers that they form layers thick enough to affect local food webs. Each individual pulses through the dark water with its red glow, and when thousands gather, the effect must resemble an underwater city at night. Buildings full of red lights, pulsing in unison to rhythms set by currents, and the slow beating of bells that serve as both propulsion and breathing, while tentacles trail behind, like loose cables hanging from infrastructure that was never properly secured, all of it drifting, all of it glowing red in places where red light should not exist. The pinecone fish, also called the pineapple fish, possesses heavy armor-like scales arranged in a pattern resembling its namesake fruit, and carries 2 light organs on its lower jaw that contain bioluminescent bacteria. These light organs glow steadily whenever the fish's mouth is open, which means the fish can control the visibility of its lights simply by opening or closing its mouth. The pinecone fish lives in relatively shallow waters compared to most bioluminescent species, sometimes as shallow as 60 feet, where it hides in caves during the day and emerges at night to hunt small crustaceans. The bioluminescence might help it see prey in dark crevices, or could serve to attract prey toward its mouth. The fish moves slowly, its heavy armor restricting rapid movement, but in its preferred environment of rocky reefs and caves. Speed matters less than the ability to withstand the bumps and scrapes of navigating through tight spaces in darkness. Mouth aglow like a miner's helmet, searching patient corners where small lives hide from larger appetites. The sea sapphire is a type of copepod, a tiny crustacean often less than a 1/4 inch long, that possesses one of the most spectacular optical displays in the ocean despite being barely visible to the naked eye. Male sea sapphires have layers of hexagonal crystal plates beneath their transparent shells that reflect light in specific wavelengths, creating flashes of brilliant blue, gold, or violet that appear and disappear as the animal moves through the water. This is not technically bioluminescence, as the light is reflected rather than produced, but the effect is equally dramatic. Tiny gems tumbling through the water, visible one moment, and vanished the next as the angle changes. The females remain transparent, lacking the reflective plates, and presumably the male's displays serve to attract these transparent mates or signal to rival males. The sea sapphire reminds us that not all ocean light comes from chemical reactions, that sometimes beauty emerges from structure alone, from the way materials are layered and light is bent, creating colors more pure than most animals can produce through any other means, and all of it in a creature so small it tumbles with the plankton, a living jewel that most observers would never notice, even if it drifted past their eyes. The Dana octopus squid grows to relatively large size for a deep-sea cephalopod, potentially reaching 7 feet in length, and possesses numerous photophores arranged across its body and arms. This squid is sometimes called the boxing squid because of its unusual defensive behavior. It curls its arms into a defensive sphere around its body when threatened, creating a globe of tentacles that makes it difficult for predators to find the vulnerable mantle and head. The photophores might create confusion during this defensive display, providing multiple points of light that make it hard for predators to determine which part of the glowing ball represents the actual body worth attacking. The Dana octopus squid also possesses serrated suckers on its arms, allowing it to hold struggling prey more effectively, and its large eyes gather what little light exists in the mesopelagic zone where it hunts, a zone of permanent dusk that requires excellent vision and the willingness to use light as both tool and weapon, revealing and concealing in equal measure depending on what the moment demands. The crystal jellyfish that provided science with green fluorescent protein continues to drift through Pacific waters, doing what it has done for millions of years, while researchers use the protein isolated from its tissues to illuminate cellular processes in laboratories worldwide. The jellyfish itself remains unaware of its contribution to human knowledge, pulsing through cold water with its translucent bell and trailing tentacles, producing its own light through biological processes it cannot understand. Just as we use that light to understand processes in our own cells, there exists a strange poetry in this relationship, that we study life by borrowing light from creatures who have nothing to gain from lending it, that we illuminate our ignorance, using tools stolen from beings who never knew they possessed anything worth stealing. The crystal jellyfish continues its simple existence, eating, growing, reproducing, glowing when touched, while pieces of its genetic material glow in laboratories on every continent, marking tumor cells, tracking neural connections, making visible what was invisible, all because this one species happened to evolve a particularly pure and stable glowing protein that worked as well in mammalian cells as it does in jellyfish tissue. The transparent sea cucumber, Enipneastes eximia, swims through open water rather than crawling along the seafloor like most of its relatives. This creature, sometimes called the headless chicken monster due to its unusual appearance, possesses a transparent body that reveals its internal organs, and those organs include bioluminescent structures that glow when the animal is disturbed. The sea cucumber swims by, undulating its body and using webbed structures that increase its surface area, moving through the water column with surprising grace for an animal whose relatives are famous for lying motionless on the ocean floor. When threatened, it can produce clouds of bioluminescent mucus, similar to other sea cucumber species, and the light appears especially dramatic because the creature's transparency provides no visual buffer between the glowing organs and the observer. Watching it swim through dark water resembles seeing a constellation of organs moving through space, without the usual courtesy of an opaque body to hold them together, just tissue and light, and slow determination moving through an environment that dissolved most visible boundaries millions of years ago. The pram bug isopod, a relative of pillbugs found under rocks on land, lives in the deep sea and reaches sizes up to 3 inches long. Recent explorations using deep-sea submersibles have discovered that many of these isopods possess bioluminescent capabilities, though the function of their light production remains unclear, since isopods have relatively simple eyes that might not even detect the light their own bodies produce. This raises interesting questions about whether the light serves to communicate with other species, perhaps predators, rather than with other isopods. The bioluminescence might be purely defensive, startling attackers or serving as a burglar alarm, or it might be an evolutionary holdover from an ancestor that had better eyes and found uses for light that current isopods no longer need but haven't lost. The pram bug trundles across the deep-sea floor on its many legs, armored and slow, occasionally glowing for reasons it cannot perceive, a living reminder that not all adaptations make perfect sense, and evolution preserves traits sometimes simply because they do no harm, leaving creatures with gifts they cannot use, capabilities without purpose, light without sight. The threadfin dragonfish extends a long barbel from its chin that can reach several times its body length, and this barbel ends in a bioluminescent lure. Unlike the anglerfish, which uses a lure growing from its head, the threadfin dragonfish waves its glowing barbel through the water like a fishing rod, potentially attracting prey toward its large mouth full of long teeth. The fish can adjust the length of the barbel by reeling it in or extending it, giving it variable fishing range depending on conditions. The dragonfish's body itself contains additional photophores arranged along its belly and sides, and like its relatives, it possesses the ability to produce and see red bioluminescence, giving it multiple lighting strategies for different hunting situations. The fish drifts in the darkness, with its chin-mounted fishing line glowing in the distance, patient and hungry, waiting for something to investigate the light. And when prey does approach, the threadfin dragonfish reels in its barbel and strikes, collapsing the distance between lure and mouth faster than most prey can process what has happened. And the darkness returns to darkness, as if nothing had occurred except the transfer of matter from one creature to another, energy moving up the food chain, one glowing deception at a time. The seven-arm octopus, despite its name, possesses 8 arms like all octopuses, but males keep one arm coiled in a pouch beneath the eye, making them appear to have only 7 until the hidden arm is revealed during mating. This large octopus, which can grow to over 11 feet from arm tip to arm tip, lives in relatively deep water along the continental margins and possesses bioluminescent photophores scattered across its body. The exact function of these light organs remains uncertain, but they might help the octopus communicate with others of its species, or could serve to confuse predators when combined with the octopus's color-changing abilities. An animal that can alter both its color and its light emission possesses extraordinary control over its visibility, able to match backgrounds, create false signals, or suddenly flare into prominence depending on the situation. The seven-arm octopus hunts in darkness, its intelligence distributed throughout its 8 arms, including the hidden one, each arm capable of acting semi-independently, probing and grasping and bringing food to the central mouth, while the skin flickers and flows with colors and lights that serve purposes we can observe but rarely fully understand, signals in a language older than language, spoken in a darkness that predates sight. The sea butterfly, a type of pteropod or swimming snail, possesses delicate wing-like appendages that flap slowly to propel it through the water column. Some species of sea butterflies include bioluminescent capabilities, producing light when disturbed that might startle predators or signal danger. These creatures, which rarely grow larger than a few millimeters, float through the water by the billions in some areas, feeding on even smaller organisms and in turn serving as food for animals as large as whales. Despite their fragility and small size, sea butterflies are important indicators of ocean health, as their shells are made of aragonite, a form of calcium carbonate especially vulnerable to ocean acidification. When the ocean becomes more acidic due to absorbed carbon dioxide, sea butterfly shells begin to dissolve, and the animals struggle to survive. Their bioluminescence continues as long as they live, tiny lights marking tiny lives in an ocean that is slowly becoming less hospitable. Each small glow a statement of existence, a chemical reaction saying, "I am here," into water that grows increasingly capable of erasing the structures that allow such creatures to persist at all. The black dragonfish possesses one of the most sexually dimorphic appearances in the deep sea. Females can grow to about 16 inches and possess functional teeth, a chin barbel with a bioluminescent lure, and light organs along their bodies. Males, however, grow to only about 3 inches, possess no teeth, no functional stomach, and no barbel. Male black dragons exist only to mate, spending their short adult lives searching for females using highly developed eyes and olfactory organs. Both sexes produce bioluminescence, but they use it for completely different purposes. Females for hunting, males possibly for recognition or courtship. The disparity between sexes is so extreme that for many years scientists thought they were observing 2 different species until genetic analysis revealed the truth. The female drifts through the deep ocean, hunting and growing, her barbel glowing, her teeth ready, while somewhere in the same dark water males search, eyeless as juveniles, suddenly granted vision and purpose in their final life stage, needing only to find a female before their energy reserves deplete, living just long enough to ensure the next generation. Tiny ghosts with enormous eyes, looking for a light in darkness that might mean the end of searching. The deep-sea hatchetfish, Argyropelicus, possesses some of the most complex bioluminescent organs in the ocean relative to its small size. These fish, typically only a few inches long, possess ventral photophores that can be individually controlled to adjust the intensity and angle of light emission, allowing them to match with high precision the faint downwelling light in their mesopelagic habitat. Some species have specialized reflectors and filters around their photophores that help direct and color the light, creating more precise counter-illumination. The fish's eyes, meanwhile, point upward to scan for prey silhouettes, creating the typical deep-sea hunting strategy of looking up while eliminating one's own shadow for viewers below. The hatchetfish's extreme vertical compression gives it the smallest possible silhouette when viewed from the side, another adaptation to minimize visibility in an environment where any detectable presence means either opportunity or death, depending on which direction attention comes from. The fish exists as a kind of optical optimization problem solved through evolution. Every surface, every angle, every light organ positioned to minimize the chances of being seen while maximizing the chances of seeing, reducing existence to geometry and bioluminescent precision, thin as a blade of light in waters where light itself is precious and rare. The viperfish possesses fangs so long they cannot fit inside its mouth when it closes, giving it a perpetually fierce expression that is actually an anatomical constraint. The first vertebra behind the fish's skull is modified to act as a shock absorber, allowing the head to snap back and the mouth to open extremely wide, almost to a right angle, expanding the gape enough to swallow prey nearly as large as itself. The viperfish's body contains many small photophores arranged in patterns along its sides, and it possesses a long dorsal ray tipped with a bioluminescent lure that it can arch forward over its head, dangling the light in front of its own face. Prey attracted to this lure swim directly into position to be struck, though the viperfish can also hunt actively, using its photophores as counter-illumination while searching for prey silhouettes above. Despite its fearsome appearance, the viperfish is not particularly large, typically around a foot long, proving again that in the deep sea, terror is not a matter of size but of adaptation, of specialized solutions to the problems of finding food in an environment where food is scarce and anything edible must be swallowed immediately, stored in a stomach that can expand to hold meals larger than seem possible, because the next meal might be days or weeks away, or might never come, making every successful hunt a victory against probability itself. The deep-sea cucumber, Peniagone vitrea, sometimes called the sea pig due to its inflated appearance and leg-like tube feet, walks across the abyssal seafloor in large groups, feeding on organic material that drifts down from the surface waters miles above. Some species in this family possess bioluminescent capabilities, producing light when disturbed that might serve defensive purposes, though at the depths where they live, over 10,000 feet down in some cases, predators are rare, and the main threats come from other scavengers competing for limited food resources. The sea pigs coordinate their movement to some degree, appearing in the same areas at the same times, though what signals allow this coordination remain unclear. They move slowly across mud that contains so little oxygen that few other animals can survive, their tube feet leaving tracks that persist for years in the still water, and occasionally they glow, down where the weight of all the ocean presses equally from every direction, where no storms penetrate, and the temperature remains just above freezing regardless of season, glowing because their ancestors glowed, carrying light into the deepest darkness on Earth, where light has no obvious purpose except to exist. A statement of biology against the void that might be purpose enough. The market squid, while not primarily a deep-sea species, provides important insights into bioluminescence because it is well studied and accessible to researchers. This squid possesses photophores in its mantle, and uses them for counter-illumination, adjusting its light output throughout the day as it moves vertically in the water column. During spawning, market squid gather in enormous numbers in coastal waters, and males competing for females create complex displays that include both rapid color changes and coordinated light patterns. Researchers have discovered that squid can detect the plane of polarized light, adding another dimension to visual communication that humans cannot perceive without technical assistance. The patterns that squid display to each other might contain information encoded in polarization that we literally cannot see, even if we watch the displays directly. This reminds us that our understanding of bioluminescent communication remains incomplete, not just because we lack context, but because we lack the sensory apparatus to detect all the signals being transmitted, like trying to understand a conversation by reading lips when half the communication happens through tone of voice we cannot hear, making us observers of displays we can only partially witness, guessing at meanings in a language that uses alphabets. Our eyes were not designed to perceive. The loose-jaw dragonfish genus includes several species that have evolved to eat prey items larger than themselves by unhinging their jaws and expanding their bodies. These fish possess enormous eyes relative to their body size, and those eyes contain a high density of rod cells that allow them to detect extremely faint light. The combination of red bioluminescence for hunting and extraordinary vision for detecting the blue-green bioluminescence of other creatures gives loose-jaw dragonfish comprehensive awareness of their surroundings in the deep mesopelagic zone. Some species have tubular eyes that point forward, providing binocular vision that helps them judge distances accurately when striking at prey. The fish themselves remain relatively small, usually less than 6 inches long. But within that compact body, they pack adaptations that seem almost excessive, as if evolution threw every possible deep-sea survival strategy into one organism and watched to see what happened. What happened is that loose-jaw dragonfish persist throughout the world's oceans, at depths where few other vertebrates can compete with them, each individual a collection of specialized solutions swimming through darkness with a red flashlight and a mouth that unhooks from its skull, hunting and being hunted in turn, surviving through a combination of stealth, surprise, and the simple persistence of trying, night after night, in waters where night means nothing, because night is everything and always has been. The salp is a gelatinous animal that looks superficially like a jellyfish, but is actually more closely related to vertebrates, possessing a simple nerve cord that represents an evolutionary link to more complex nervous systems. Salps exist as either solitary individuals or as colonial chains where many individuals connect to form living ribbons that can stretch dozens of feet through the water. Some species of salps possess bioluminescent capabilities, producing light when disturbed that travels along the chain if they are in colonial form, creating waves of luminescence that pass from individual to individual. Salps feed by pumping water through their bodies and filtering out tiny food particles, and they can pump their own body volume of water every few seconds, making them extraordinarily efficient feeders. When salp populations bloom, as they sometimes do in response to particular ocean conditions, they can filter enormous volumes of water and transfer substantial amounts of carbon from surface waters to the deep sea. When they die and sink, their bodies serving as vehicles that transport organic material down into the abyss. Each individual salp glows when it must, pulses when it breathes, and connects to others of its kind when the time and conditions align, creating temporary structures of shared purpose that might span the length of a whale, all to filter the microscopic abundance of the ocean and pass it through bodies so simple they barely qualify as individuals, so connected they barely qualify as separate, existing in the space between single and multiple, glowing when the darkness requires acknowledging. The cookie-cutter shark, mentioned earlier for its bioluminescent camouflage strategy, typically grows to only about 20 inches long, but can attack prey many times its size. The shark's specialized mouth allows it to attach to whales, dolphins, large fish, and even submarines, using its suction and teeth to remove a circular plug of tissue before swimming away. The bioluminescent false shadow on its throat lures larger predators, close enough for the shark to strike from below, reversing the typical predator-prey relationship by making the cookie cutter's small size appear to be an advantage rather than a vulnerability. The shark's teeth on the lower jaw form a continuous saw-like edge with no gaps, and these teeth are replaced as a single unit, falling out all at once rather than individually, which means cookie-cutter sharks swallow their old teeth. The calcium from these teeth might be recycled or might help with buoyancy, theories that remain unconfirmed but plausible. The shark drifts through mid-water depths, glowing belly, rendering it invisible except for that one dark patch, waiting for something large and alive to swim close enough that size becomes irrelevant, demonstrating that in the ocean's architecture of eating and being eaten, even the small can take bites from giants, if they trick the giants into presenting themselves as willing targets, turning the hunter into the hunted, through nothing more complicated than careful light management and the patience to wait suspended in water that supports both predator and prey without judgment or preference. The bioluminescent plankton called Noctiluca, also known as sea sparkle, are single-celled organisms that create some of the most spectacular light displays in coastal waters. Unlike the dinoflagellates that produce bioluminescent bays, Noctiluca are larger and can sometimes be seen as individual pale spheres floating in the water. When disturbed, they produce brief flashes of blue-green light, and when they bloom in large numbers, every wave breaking on shore glows with bioluminescence, and footprints in shallow water shine with trails of light that fade quickly. These blooms can be so dense that the daytime water appears reddish-brown, a phenomenon called red tide. Though not all red tides produce bioluminescence, and not all are caused by Noctiluca, the organisms themselves consume other plankton and bacteria, playing complex roles in marine food webs that scientists are still working to fully understand. They drift with currents, bloom when conditions favor their growth, and respond to movement with light that might serve to startle small predators or attract larger predators to eat whatever disturbed the Noctiluca in the first place. Each individual lights up for less than a second, but when millions respond together, the ocean surface becomes a living display that turns darkness into cascades of biological light, answering every motion with illumination, every touch with glow, as if the ocean itself has become sensitive to contact and responds the only way it knows how, with beauty that exists for purely functional reasons, but strikes observers as miraculous, regardless of function. Light calling to light in waters that hold more questions than answers about why organisms choose, or are chosen, to shine. The deep-sea amphipod, a small crustacean related to the sandhoppers found on beaches, lives at depths that would crush most surface-dwelling organisms. Some species of amphipods possess bioluminescent organs, though their small size means the light they produce appears as tiny pinpricks in the darkness. These amphipods often serve as prey for larger creatures, and their bioluminescence might startle predators momentarily or serve as a burglar alarm to attract even larger threats. Amphipods play crucial roles in deep-sea food webs, despite their small size, breaking down organic material and serving as food for fish, squid, and other predators. They scuttle across the seafloor or swim through the water column with rapid movements of their curved bodies, and when they glow, they become briefly visible in an environment where visibility usually means danger. Each individual amphipod represents a small life in a vast space, but collectively these creatures process enormous amounts of organic material, connecting the surface waters to the deep sea through their feeding and through their deaths, carrying nutrients and energy down into depths where both are scarce, and sometimes, for reasons that might protect them or might doom them, they choose to glow, making themselves known in darkness that otherwise would hold no record of their passing. The anglerfish's mating strategy ranks among the strangest in the animal kingdom. In many anglerfish species, males are tiny compared to females, sometimes less than 1/10 their size, and males possess no lure and almost no ability to feed. When a male finds a female, which itself is a remarkable achievement in the vast darkness of the deep sea, he bites into her body and fuses with her permanently. His circulatory system connects to hers, and he receives nutrients directly from her blood while providing sperm whenever she is ready to spawn. Over time, the male's body degenerates until he is little more than a sperm-producing appendage attached to the female. His eyes, fins, and most organs disappearing as unnecessary. Some females carry multiple males fused to their bodies, creating arrangements that seem more like science fiction than biology. The female continues to hunt using her bioluminescent lure, growing larger and producing eggs, while the males she collected in her youth remain attached, simplified to their single reproductive function, no longer individuals in any meaningful sense but not quite parts of the female either. Existing in a state between self and other that evolution created as a solution to the problem of finding mates in the largest, darkest habitat on Earth, where encountering another of your species might happen only once in a lifetime, if at all. The deep-sea jellyfish, Deepstaria enigmatica, possesses a bell so thin and wide it resembles a floating bedsheet, sometimes reaching 6 feet across, while remaining nearly two-dimensional. This jellyfish drifts through mid-water depths, and its bell often contains a small isopod that rides along inside the jellyfish's body, visible through the transparent tissue. While Deepstaria's bioluminescent capabilities are not well documented, related species produce light displays, and the jellyfish's hunting strategy involves slowly swimming over prey and engulfing them in its bell, which closes like a bag around whatever it has captured. The process happens in slow motion, the jellyfish moving with dreamlike patience, and anything caught inside finds itself pressed against sticky tissue that begins digestion. The resident isopod presumably has some immunity to this process or simply avoids the sticky areas, living inside a predator that moves like liquid paper through water dark as ink, occasionally glowing if disturbed, occasionally capturing prey through methods more gentle than violent, more patient than aggressive, simply draping itself over life and waiting for that life to become food, while inside its own body, another creature survives, by understanding its host so completely that it can live where nothing else could, protected by transparency and familiarity, riding through the deep sea inside a predator, too slow to catch it, even if it tried. The ostracod Vargula hilgendorfi, also known as the sea firefly mentioned earlier, produces its bioluminescent display by releasing two chemicals that react outside the body rather than within specialized organs. The ostracod squirts luciferin and luciferase into the water, where they mix and produce a blue luminescent cloud that expands and persists for several seconds. Japanese researchers have studied these ostracods extensively because the luciferin-luciferase reaction they produce is remarkably stable and has been developed for use in various biotechnology applications, including detecting bacterial contamination and measuring ATP in cells. The ostracods themselves use the display for courtship, with males creating specific patterns of luminescent puffs that females evaluate before choosing mates. Different species produce different patterns, suggesting that these light displays contain enough information to prevent cross-species mating, even when multiple ostracod species inhabit the same waters. The tiny crustaceans gather in the darkness, males releasing clouds of light in sequences, females watching and judging, decisions being made based on criteria written in patterns of glow, and somewhere in that communication lies enough specificity that each finds its own kind, that the right sequences connect with the right observers, that out of darkness and chemicals mixed in seawater comes recognition, preference, choice, and eventually the next generation, all communicated through light that exists outside the body. Messages written in water that disappear as soon as they are read. The barrel-eye fish, also called Macropinna microstoma, possesses one of the most unusual eye structures in the animal kingdom. Its eyes are tubular and point upward, housed within a transparent dome on top of its head that allows the eyes to rotate and look in different directions while remaining protected. The The fish's body contains several photophores that might serve for counter-illumination, and those remarkable eyes can detect the faint silhouettes of prey above, while also, potentially, spotting the bioluminescent lures of siphonophores, which the barrel eye might steal prey from without triggering the siphonophore's stinging cells. The transparent dome on the fish's head gives it a skull you can see through, a window into a space that usually remains hidden, and through that window, two green tubular eyes scan the waters above, looking for food or danger, rotating to track movement, gathering photons in an environment where every photon matters. The fish drifts in the twilight zone, strange and patient, its transparent head catching faint light from above, its body fading into darkness below, existing as mostly eyes and almost nothing else that matters, a creature that invested so heavily in vision that it redesigned its skull to accommodate the equipment necessary for seeing in near darkness, proving that in the ocean's depths, information gathered through sight is worth almost any anatomical compromise, any deviation from the standard body plan, because the alternative to seeing is being blind in a place where blind means invisible to yourself and visible to everything else. The deep-sea swell shark, when threatened, can swallow water or air to inflate its body, making itself too large for predators to swallow and wedging itself into crevices so it cannot be pulled out. This defensive strategy works well in the rocky habitats where the shark lives, typically at depths between 600 and 1,500 feet. While the swell shark is not bioluminescent itself, it fluoresces under ultraviolet light, and recent research suggests that at the depths where it lives, some sunlight in the blue spectrum might penetrate far enough to cause this fluorescence to become visible. The shark's skin contains biofluorescent compounds that absorb blue light and re-emit it as green, potentially creating patterns visible to other swell sharks that can see these wavelengths. This represents a different kind of ocean light, not produced through chemical reactions, but through the transformation of existing light into different colors, a subtle glow that depends on external light sources rather than internal chemistry. The swell shark rests in rocky crevices during the day and emerges at night to hunt. And whether it glows faintly green in the dim blue light that reaches its habitat remains a question that researchers are still investigating. But the possibility suggests that ocean light takes more forms than we have yet catalogued. That even without bioluminescence, creatures find ways to make themselves visible to their own kind while remaining invisible to others. Communication through selective glow in wavelengths that matter only to those with the right eyes to see them. The glass squid family includes many species, most of which possess transparent bodies that make them difficult to see. These squid often have light organs positioned around their eyes and on their tentacles, and the combination of transparency and strategic bioluminescence creates complex camouflage that works from multiple angles. Some glass squid position their light organs near their digestive system, which is usually the most visible part of their otherwise transparent bodies, and the light might serve to illuminate and disguise the dark mass of recently consumed food. The squid drift through mid-water depths, nearly invisible, their internal organs appearing to float in empty water, and when they activate their photophores, they become points of light without visible bodies, like stars that move with purpose rather than following fixed paths across the sky. Young glass squid are often more transparent than adults, suggesting that the need for invisibility decreases as the animals grow large enough to defend themselves or escape from predators. The squid exist in this state, between presence and absence, between matter and light, their bodies so reduced to essentials that they seem more idea than animal, more concept than creature, drifting through darkness that cannot quite hide them, and light that cannot quite reveal them, finding safety in the narrow space between being seen and being invisible, where transparency and strategic illumination combine to create the closest thing to true camouflage that physics allows. In an environment with no surfaces to hide behind, no colors to match, nothing but water and light, and the endless possibility of being noticed, the sea pen's bioluminescence travels along its structure in waves that can repeat several times after a single stimulus. creating a display that outlasts the original disturbance. Researchers have discovered that these waves travel through a simple nerve network that coordinates the colonial polyps, each polyp triggering its neighbors in sequence. The system represents one of the simplest forms of nervous communication, basic enough that it can be studied to understand how nervous systems might have evolved in ancient animals. The sea pen itself remains rooted in the seafloor sediment, unable to move beyond, slowly repositioning its orientation, and its only defense against mobile predators consists of these light displays and the chemical deterrents in its tissues. When something brushes against a sea pen in complete darkness, the response appears as if the touch awakened electricity in the flesh, as if the contact completed a circuit that allows energy to flow visibly through living tissue. The light travels, fades, travels again, each wave slightly dimmer than the last, until the sea pen returns to darkness and resumes its patient waiting. Days might pass between disturbances, or hours might contain dozens of touches, each answered with the same traveling light, the same pulse of warning or attraction, the same response programmed so deeply into the colony's structure that individual polyps need not decide whether to glow. They simply glow because they are connected to others that glow, because the wave reaches them and they continue it, passing signal to neighbor in an unbroken chain of light that defines the boundaries of their shared body, the full extent of their collective self, written in bioluminescence against the darkness that otherwise would give no indication where one organism ends and another begins. The northern comb jelly, Bioluminescent infundibulum, propels itself through Arctic waters using the rhythmic beating of 8 rows of cilia, creating rainbow refractions visible even in daylight. At night, when disturbed, this comb jelly produces blue bioluminescence that flickers along the cilia rows in traveling waves. The Arctic waters where these animals live remain dark for much of the year, making bioluminescence potentially more important for communication or defense than in areas with regular day-night cycles. Comb jellies have existed for potentially over 500 million years, making them some of the oldest predators on Earth, and their nervous systems evolved independently from the nervous systems of other animals, suggesting that the ability to coordinate complex behaviors like bioluminescent displays arose multiple times in evolutionary history. The northern comb jelly drifts through cold water with its mouth opening wide to engulf prey, its cilia rows beating constantly, pulling it forward and creating currents that draw food toward its mouth. And when something threatens this ancient lineage's modern representatives, they respond with light that their ancestors likely also produced, an answer written in genes so old that they predate most of what we think of as animal life, yet still functional, still serving the same purposes, still transforming danger into display, and darkness into brief moments of blue illumination that warn or attract or simply exist as side effects of metabolic processes we do not fully understand. Light for light's sake in waters too cold for comfort, but exactly right for creatures that evolved here and nowhere else, perfectly adapted to an environment that seems hostile only to those who did not evolve to call it home. The Pacific black dragon, Idiocanthus antrostomus, shows the extreme sexual dimorphism common to many deep-sea fish species. Females grow to about 20 inches and possess all the features typically associated with dragonfish, including elongated bodies, fang-like teeth, a long chin barbel with a bioluminescent lure, and photophores arranged along the body. Males, conversely, grow to only about 3 inches, possess no barbel, no teeth, and no functional digestive system in their adult form. Male larvae of some dragonfish species have eyes on the ends of long stalks extending from their heads, a bizarre feature that disappears during metamorphosis to the adult form. These stalked eyes might allow the larvae to see in multiple directions simultaneously, or might increase their ability to detect faint light by positioning the eyes away from the body. The purpose remains uncertain, but the feature ranks among the strangest larval adaptations in the ocean. Adult males live only to mate, using their limited energy reserves to search for females, guided by bioluminescent signals or chemical cues through waters so vast that finding a mate seems statistically impossible, yet the species persists, which means the impossible happens often enough that Pacific black dragons continue to exist across their range. Males somehow locating females, females somehow surviving long enough to reproduce multiple times. Larvae somehow growing in an environment that offers little food and many dangers, each generation threading through improbabilities that would seem insurmountable if we did not have the evidence of their existence, proving that survival finds ways we have not yet imagined, that life persists, not because it is easy, but because persistence itself, repeated enough times across enough generations, becomes a kind of inevitability. And in that persistence, there is light. The deep-sea squid, Octopotaethys delatron, possesses an unusual defense mechanism involving its arms. When a predator grabs one of this squid's arms, the limb detaches easily, and the severed arm continues to move and flash with bioluminescence for several hours after separation, creating an active decoy that presumably occupies the predator's attention while the squid escapes. Unlike other squid species that can regenerate lost arms, Octopotaethys appears to commit to the loss, as specimens have been found with missing arms that show no signs of regeneration. This suggests that the squid's arms are sacrificial tools rather than temporary losses, and the animal lives out its life with fewer limbs, if it survives multiple attacks. The trade of an arm for life represents an extreme commitment to survival, and the fact that the arms continue displaying bioluminescent patterns after detachment suggests sophisticated programming in the arm's local nerve network, allowing it to function semi-independently even after separation from the central brain. The squid drifts through the darkness with whatever arms it has retained, each arm containing memories written in nerve patterns, carrying instructions for what to do if separated, already prepared for the possibility of sacrifice. And when that moment comes, when a predator strikes and teeth close on flesh, the arm accepts its fate and detaches, continuing to swim and glow as if it were still whole, as if the sacrifice had not occurred. Buying time measured in the seconds or minutes, it takes a predator to realize it has caught only a piece of what it attacked, while the squid, now lighter by one arm, moves away into darkness where it might live, days or years or decades. One arm less than complete but alive, which in the deep sea is the only measure that matters, presence against the probability of absence, continuity against the expectation of ending. The midwater jellyfish, Atolla wivili, already mentioned for its alarm display, possesses such a reliable response to disturbance that researchers use it to test equipment designed to detect bioluminescence in the deep ocean. The jellyfish's spinning light display activates consistently when touched, making it an ideal test subject for cameras and sensors. This jellyfish has become important to science, not just for its own sake, but as a tool for understanding bioluminescence more broadly. Its predictable behavior, allowing researchers to calibrate instruments and test theories. The Atolla drifts through global oceans, common enough that submersibles encounter it regularly, and each individual carries within its simple nervous system the instructions for creating its spinning alarm, ready to activate at a moment's notice. A demonstration that has occurred countless times in darkness, where no human eyes could see it, and countless times in the illumination of submersible lights, where cameras record and scientists analyze. The jellyfish does not know it has become famous in the small circles where deep-sea biology is studied and discussed, does not know that papers have been written describing its behavior in technical detail, does not know that its image appears in presentations and documentaries, teaching broader audiences about bioluminescence. It simply drifts and eats and pulses its bell to stay at its preferred depth. And when something touches it, whether that touch comes from a predator or a scientific instrument, it spins its alarm into the water and hopes that whatever happens next allows it to continue existing, continues the line that connects it to ancestors who drifted through the same waters when humans had not yet evolved. When nothing capable of wondering about bioluminescence existed anywhere on Earth, But the light displays continued anyway, serving purposes that required no observers, creating beauty that no eyes perceived, until eventually eyes did evolve, did perceive, did wonder, and the wondering continues while the jellyfish spins its alarm, unchanged and perfect, requiring nothing from us but the humility to recognize that it was performing this display long before we arrived to appreciate it, and will continue long after we are gone. The stoplight loosejaw mentioned earlier represents only one species in a family of fish that have evolved various solutions to the problem of hunting in total darkness. Different loosejaw species possess different hunting strategies, different light organs, different jaw mechanisms, but all share the basic body plan of a large head, enormous mouth, and bioluminescent capabilities. Some species hunt actively, swimming through the water column in search of prey, while others remain nearly motionless, waiting for food to drift within range. The variety of strategies within a single family demonstrates that even in the relatively uniform environment of the deep sea, there are multiple ways to solve the same problems, multiple evolutionary paths that lead to success. No single solution dominates because each environment's particular characteristics, the exact depth, the currents, the presence or absence of specific prey species, favor different approaches. The loosejaw fish in their various forms swim or drift through waters distributed across the world's oceans, each individual executing the strategy encoded in its genes, strategies refined through millions of years of survival and reproduction. Millions of years of small adjustments and successful hunts and failed attempts until the current moment, where each loosejaw exists as the latest iteration of a design that has proven successful enough to persist, but not so perfect that evolution has stopped refining it, leaving room for variation, for difference, for the continuing possibility that some future loosejaw might find an even better way to live in the darkness, or that conditions might change in ways that favor one variation over others, selecting new winners from the genetic lottery that plays out in every generation, dealing cards that say, survive or disappear, contribute genes to the future or end the line, all while glowing red or green or blue in waters that care nothing for which colors persist and which fade into evolutionary dead ends, darkness being neutral about what light it allows to shine. The Humboldt squid, also called the jumbo squid, can grow to 6 feet long and possesses bioluminescent organs called photophores distributed across its body. These squid can change the intensity and pattern of their bioluminescence rapidly, creating what appears to be communication between individuals in a school. Humboldt squid hunt in groups, coordinating attacks on fish and sometimes showing complex social behaviors that suggest sophisticated communication systems. The bioluminescent displays might serve multiple functions simultaneously: communication with other squid, counter-illumination for camouflage, and possibly confusion of prey during attacks. These squid are known for their aggressive behavior and their willingness to approach divers, though attacks on humans are rare and usually occur in circumstances where the squid might have mistaken a diver for prey or a competitor. The squid flash with white, red, and other colors across their bodies, rapid changes that can occur several times per second, creating a dynamic display that suggests complex information transfer. Researchers studying video of Humboldt squid hunting have identified what might be specific signals for attack, retreat, or coordination, but confirming the meaning of these signals remains difficult because the squid live in open ocean environments where long-term observation is challenging. The squid swim through the eastern Pacific in schools that can number thousands of individuals, creating concentrations of bioluminescent-capable predators that rival any other marine gathering. Each individual capable of communication through light, each individual responding to the lights of others, creating a web of visual information that flows through the school at the speed of light. Travel through water, decisions made and executed in the time it takes for a photophore to activate and a neighbor to register that activation. Fast enough to coordinate attacks on fast-moving prey, slow enough that we can perceive it with our technology, if not our unaided eyes. leaving us with recordings that show something complex happening but insufficient understanding to claim we know what all those flashes mean. What information passes between squids swimming together in waters too dark for reflected light to matter, communicating through signals they create themselves, speaking in a language that literally glows with every syllable, every sentence, every conversation carried out while hunting or traveling, or whatever activities make up the life of a Humboldt squid between birth and death in the enormous spaces of the open ocean. The deep-sea polychaete worms include species like the swimmer worms that possess perhaps the strangest bioluminescent defense in the ocean. When threatened, these worms release small spherical organs filled with bioluminescent chemicals that they produce in pouches along their bodies. These bombs drift away from the worm while glowing brightly, creating multiple false targets that presumably confuse predators about which glowing object represents the actual prey. The worm can release multiple bombs in sequence, creating a cloud of glowing spheres that slowly drift apart while the worm itself swims away in a direction different from the bomb's trajectories. Once released, the bombs cannot be retrieved or reused, making this a costly defense that the worm presumably reserves for serious threats. The bombs glow for several minutes before fading, long enough to serve their purpose, but brief enough that they don't create permanent pollution of light in the water. This defense mechanism was only discovered in recent years during deep-sea submersible expeditions, and it raises questions about how many other unusual bioluminescent behaviors remain undiscovered in the vast, unexplored portions of the deep ocean. The swimmer worm swims through the darkness carrying its arsenal of light bombs, each bomb containing chemicals produced through metabolic processes, resources allocated to defense rather than growth or reproduction, an investment that pays off only if the worm survives long enough to reproduce more times than it would have without the bombs, and presumably the investment is sound because the worms persist, because evolution tested the strategy across countless generations and found it worth maintaining, worth the cost, worth the energy expenditure to create bombs that might never be needed, but stand ready just in case. Light trapped in spheres that activate upon release. Final messages from a worm that chose escape over confrontation, survival over standing ground, life over the alternative. Creating light shows that no audience was meant to see, meant only to confuse and distract, while the real escape happens invisibly nearby. The deep-sea pelagic worm Tomopterus, the gossamer worm mentioned previously for its yellow bioluminescence, has been subject to additional studies that revealed surprising details about its light production. The yellow light it produces comes from a different chemical pathway than the blue-green light produced by most bioluminescent organisms, suggesting independent evolution of bioluminescence, or significant modification of the ancestral system. The worm's transparent body shows its internal organs clearly, and researchers can watch the bioluminescent chemicals being produced in specialized cells before being moved to the appendages where they are deployed. The worm's swimming motion resembles a gentle undulation, using its paddle-like parapodia to move through the water with minimal disturbance, and this silent movement, combined with its transparency, makes it nearly undetectable until it chooses to release its glowing appendages. The fact that the worm can detach and regenerate these appendages suggests a high metabolic cost to maintaining them, but an even higher survival value in possessing them. The Tomopterus drifts through global oceans, most common in productive areas where food is more available. Transparent bodies occasionally catching light from bioluminescent neighbors, occasionally producing their own yellow glow when threatened, mostly existing in a state of invisible presence, known to science, only because dedicated researchers trawled the right depths at the right times and examined their catches carefully enough to notice transparent worms among the other specimens, worms whose contribution to deep-sea ecology remains largely unknown, but whose existence adds another small piece to the vast puzzle of how life survives and spreads through environments that seem designed to prevent survival. Oceans so deep and dark that discovering new species continues with every expedition, every descent into waters we can visit only briefly, and with enormous technological support, while creatures like Tomopterus live their entire lives there, transparent and glowing yellow when necessary, proof that the ocean contains more variations on the theme of life than we have yet documented, perhaps more than we can document before those variations evolve into something new or disappear entirely, replaced by creatures better adapted to whatever conditions the future brings. Though what better means in an ocean, we are changing faster than evolution typically operates, remains an open question, one that will be answered whether we observe the answer or not, whether we care about the answer or not. The ocean continuing its experiments in survival with or without human witnesses. Transparent worms drifting through darkness with yellow lights waiting in their tissues, ready to glow. The lanternfish mentioned earlier participate in what is called diel vertical migration, the daily journey between deep water during the day and shallow water at night. This migration occurs across the world's oceans and involves not just lanternfish, but countless other species, creating a massive movement of biomass that happens every day in the rhythm of light and darkness at the surface. As these fish rise at dusk, their bioluminescence activates, and the ascending clouds of lanternfish create layers of glowing bodies moving upward through the water column. Naval sonar systems detect this deep scattering layer, which was once mysterious, but is now understood to be primarily composed of lanternfish and other small organisms, with swim bladders or bioluminescent organs that reflect or produce sound and light. The migration might serve to protect the fish from visual predators during daylight hours, by keeping them in the darkness of deep water while allowing them to access the food-rich surface waters at night, when visual predators cannot hunt as effectively. The energy cost of swimming hundreds of meters vertically twice per day must be offset by the advantages of this strategy, and the fact that so many species participate suggests the benefits are substantial. Each night the migration begins, triggered by decreasing light at the surface, and millions upon millions of fish begin swimming upward, their belly lights glowing to illuminate their silhouettes, creating perhaps the largest coordinated animal movement on Earth, though it happens underwater where human eyes rarely witness it. A spectacle of glowing fish rising through darkness, like stars ascending from a sea of night, reversed constellations moving upward instead of wheeling across the sky. Biological light, replacing stellar light in waters where no stars penetrate, where the only light comes from life itself, and that life rises and falls on a schedule older than human observation, older than human existence, a rhythm maintained for millions of years by creatures whose individual lives span only a few years, but whose collective behavior represents something approaching permanence, at least on human timescales. Though in geological time, even these ancient patterns are temporary, contingent on conditions that might change, might disappear, leaving only fossils to suggest that once lanternfish rose at dusk and descended at dawn, once the deep sea glowed with ascending lights, once this happened, and possibly will happen again when the turning of ages brings back conditions that favor such patterns, or possibly will never happen again, making this moment, this era, the time of the lanternfish migration, a brief phenomenon in Earth's history, though brief, measured in millions of years, is longer than brief measured in human lives, giving us time to notice, to study, to wonder at this daily movement of glowing life through waters dark as space, empty as space, yet full of life that glows. The crystal jellyfish that gave science GFP has relatives across the world's oceans, many of which also produce bioluminescence through similar proteins, though each species possesses variations on the basic structure that produce different colors or different intensities of light. Some jellyfish produce blue light directly, while others produce blue light that gets converted to green through fluorescent proteins, creating a two-stage system that produces more visible light than single-stage systems. The evolutionary advantage of this complexity remains unclear, though theories suggest that the green light might penetrate water more effectively than blue at certain depths, or that the fluorescent protein provides some protective benefit beyond light production. The crystal jellyfish drifts through Pacific waters, pulsing its bell to stay suspended at the depth it prefers, trailing tentacles that capture small prey, living out its life cycle from tiny polyp to free-swimming medusa, sometimes blooming in large numbers when conditions favor its reproduction, sometimes rare enough that beachcombers consider finding one washed ashore to be noteworthy. The jellyfish has no brain, no centralized decision-making structure, yet it survives and reproduces using a distributed nervous system that coordinates its bell contractions, its feeding responses, its bioluminescent displays. The simplicity of this system makes it ideal for research, allowing scientists to trace neural pathways and understand basic principles of how nervous systems coordinate behavior. The jellyfish, meanwhile, continues existing in the way it always has, responding to stimuli with programmed reactions, glowing when touched, pulsing when currents change, eating when prey contacts its tentacles, existing without awareness that it exists, without knowledge of GFP or Nobel Prizes, or the thousands of laboratories where its protein helps researchers understand cancer, neural development, and countless other biological processes. Its accidental gift to science, requiring nothing from it and giving it nothing in return, except perhaps slightly more attention from the subset of humanity that thinks about jellyfish, thinks about where GFP came from, thinks about how a protein evolved to help a simple jellyfish glow, ended up transforming biological research across every field that uses microscopes and needs to see the invisible, all because this one species of jellyfish produces a particularly stable and useful protein that works not just in jellyfish tissue, but in bacterial cells and mammalian cells and plant cells and anywhere else researchers have tried to use it. A universal adapter between biology and visibility, between process and observation, between what happens in cells and what we can witness happening in cells, all from a jellyfish that drifts and pulses and glows, unchanged by its contribution to science, unknowing of its importance, simply existing as it has existed for millions of years before we found it, and will exist for however long afterward. Its lineage persists, glowing in the dark Pacific waters, legacy already secured in the form of a protein that bears its name in scientific nomenclature. Achorea victoria, providing achorin and green fluorescent protein, giving without knowing it gives, illuminating without intending to illuminate anything beyond the water, immediately around its bell, creating light for its own purposes that serves our purposes equally well, maybe better, proof that knowledge can come from anywhere, from the most unlikely sources, from creatures we might never have studied if someone had not wondered why a jellyfish glows green, if someone had not bothered to isolate the mechanism, if someone had not thought to try the protein in other organisms. A chain of curiosity and careful work that started with a glowing jellyfish and ended up changing how we see life at the molecular level. All thanks to something that just wanted to exist in peace, pulsing through the ocean, eating small prey, reproducing when conditions allowed, and occasionally, when touched, glowing green with a light that would change the world. The ocean's bioluminescence represents one of the most successful adaptations in Earth's history, having evolved independently in dozens of different lineages, suggesting that the ability to produce light provides such significant advantages that evolution discovers it repeatedly whenever conditions make it possible. The chemistry varies between different groups, some using luciferin-luciferase reactions, others using photoprotein systems, others using bacterial symbionts, but the result remains similar: light produced with extraordinary efficiency in organisms living in environments where light is scarce. This convergent evolution of bioluminescence suggests that in the ocean's depths, light is not merely useful but essential, that without the ability to produce or detect light, survival becomes significantly more difficult, making bioluminescence one of the defining characteristics of deep-sea life. The ocean glows, not with reflected sunlight, but with light generated by the creatures who live there, making the deep sea a self-illuminating realm where life creates its own visibility, its own visual environment, its own standards for what constitutes communication, camouflage, and awareness. We surface dwellers live in a world illuminated by a star, taking for granted that light exists independently of life, that we see because photons arrive from the sun and bounce off surfaces into our eyes. In the deep ocean, light exists because life produces it, creating a fundamental difference in how organisms interact with their environment. To be bioluminescent is to be the source of light rather than its observer. To create visibility rather than existing within visibility, created by external sources. The deep-sea creatures swimming through darkness with their photophores glowing live in a universe of their own making, where every light source indicates life, where darkness is default and light is decision, where being seen means choosing to be seen or failing to hide adequately, where seeing means either catching your own light reflected back or detecting someone else's choice to glow. This inverted relationship with light creates an environment fundamentally different from our surface world, so different that imagining it accurately requires setting aside assumptions about how vision works, how hunting works, how avoiding being hunted works, assuming instead a darkness so complete that it feels solid. And into that darkness, creatures inject points of light, traveling lights, flashing lights, steady lights, lights that warn, and lights that attract, lights that disguise, and lights that reveal, an entire visual language written in bioluminescence by creatures who never learned language but speak it fluently nonetheless, who never studied light but understand its properties through millions of years of evolutionary refinement, who never chose to glow but do so because their ancestors who glowed survived better than those who did not, passing down the genes and proteins and cellular machinery necessary to transform chemical energy into photons, to turn metabolism into illumination, to make their presence known in a place where presence otherwise might mean nothing, where existing and not existing could be functionally identical if not for that glow, that flash, that steady shine saying, "I am here. I exist. I matter at least to myself and possibly to you if you are prey or predator or mate. But regardless, I glow. Therefore I am." Light proving being in waters where being requires proof. And now, the glowing creatures fade behind your thoughts. We've drifted through 100 quiet truths about bioluminescent ocean life. From dinoflagellates that make waves glow to anglerfish hunting with living lamps. From jellyfish that gave us scientific tools to squid that speak in flashing light. You are connected to this world. The same chemistry that makes a jellyfish glow exists in variations throughout all life on Earth. The same molecules we use for different purposes, the same cellular machinery adapted to different ends. The ocean that covers most of our planet holds these glowing creatures in its depths, continuing their ancient patterns whether we watch or not. Tonight, as you rest, crystal jellyfish drift through Pacific waters. Lanternfish rise toward the surface, and vampire squid turn themselves inside out in the deep. The ocean glows with the light of a billion living things, each one transforming darkness into something visible, each one proving that even in the deepest places, life finds ways to shine. And you are safe, warm, resting in a world full of wonder, connected to waters you may never visit, but which exist nonetheless, glowing in the dark. If you're still awake, go ahead and watch the next chapter. Sleep well and dream softly of light in darkness, of creatures who carry their own stars, of an ocean that illuminates itself. Good night.